Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, if you have a business and want to take it to the next level, this is the episode for you. If you stay to the end, my brother Nick is actually going to give 3 things that you can actually start using in your business today to level up your business in 2025. Guys, welcome my friend Nick to the show. He is actually an author, speaker, he entrepreneur, podcast host. He's a Swiss Army knife of positivity. Brother, welcome to the show. How are you?
Richard, I'm better today. That I get to start the day off with you, right? What a great way to kick it off. Your message to your listeners and to the masses is phenomenal. You know, your story gives hope for all, right? And I just love it. I love sharing my message, and I love being around positive people like you, which I just think is so cool. I think this podcast is doing great work. And hopefully we hit a couple veins for people that not only do they get stuff that they could implement in their business today and tomorrow, but also maybe somebody that's looking for a little hope, we give them some hope.
I love it. And we'll probably talk about physical health. We might even talk a little bit about physical health, because without health, there is no wealth. So we might talk about that later. But my first question is, what is your definition of resiliency?
Yeah. So I think a lot about that every day. And I think, resilience comes at different velocities for all of us, right? As entrepreneurs and business owners, we need to be resilient every day and push through. And I remember I was having a conversation in the parking lot of a business with a mentor. And this guy was a very established entrepreneur and very established, been successful. And I said, when do you stop being afraid? He looked at me and said, I'm afraid every day. I got to push through every day. And to me, that's resilience, pushing through that fear, right? Knowing what to do is easy, but doing it is hard, and just pushing through every day to do it. It's easier said in words. Actions are tougher, right? So we have to kind of force ourselves to do that. And I think the other thing you have to realize is, we're not in this alone. And as soon as you realize that, and you get a support team, you get a support person, you get a coach like yourself or somebody to kind of help you get to that next level, that will help you master your resilience, right? I got lucky. I grew up in sales, right? So you have to kind of be resilient or you're gone, right? It's just, if you're not resilient, it's not for you, right? Picking up that phone every day. I didn't know any better. They said, pick up the phone and make the dials. So I picked up the phone and made the dials and read the script. And you have to be resilient in that. And I think it's the little micro wins that you set for yourself that force you to keep on pushing and pushing and pushing.
All right. And now, so like we talked about earlier, I'm a big sales guy. Yeah. I love sales. I've done everything from door to door to selling timeshares to selling burial plots. So I've learned to take a shit ton of no's, but I know that each no gets me closer to a yes. So, but tell us a little bit about your first inroads into sales.
Well, it started really young, to be honest. So I had a company probably when I was 14, and we were distributors, i.e. passing out the flyers that annoy you as a homeowner. And so I had people that worked for me, and I would go out and hustle other businesses, and we would blanket areas, right? So I had young kids working for me. We got paid by house. And so that was my first business. So as a 14-year-old, you kind of had to knock on doors or knock on businesses. I got lucky where somebody said yes. And then we just keep on doing it. It's ironic. Later on in life, I had a direct mail company that we were mailing to houses versus knocking on doors. Right after college, I did a typical management trainee program, and then I was in sales. It was in the financial world, and it was in the 90s, right? So the go-go 90s, where everybody was selling until the 97 recession. But we were just pounding the phones every day. 50 dials to 100 dials in the morning, 50 to 100 dials in the afternoon. That's how you built build your book of business, calling on people either through D&B lists, Dun and Bradstreet lists for those that are listening, or we bought the manufacturer's guide that's going to age me. But so from your audience right now, everything is so easy to find information. Back then we had the blue book, the manufacturer's guide, and we would be flipping through it and called business owners and, just kind of breaking through. And so that was how I started. And I was very lucky that I had really good coaches and really good mentors, i.e. they should always, find somebody to help you get there. And people that just took a liking and shining to me. And there was really established people in the office, i.e. they were making a lot of money and they were really good at what they did. And I just peppered them with questions. Hey, I'll buy you lunch. I'll buy you breakfast. I'll buy you dinner. I'll go work out with you. I'll go run with you, whatever it was, and just learn from them. And I think they just like that gumption. The other thing I learned, Richard, and I think you and I were talking about that, especially since you've been around, as long as I have, selling, is a lot of guys do a lot of talking, but they have a little action, right? And so some of the biggest talkers, in the morning meetings and the Monday morning sales meetings, they would talk a great game, but I never saw them pick up the phone. And I'm like, oh boy, must be lucky to have a book of business that, it just comes to you. And I realized they weren't doing anything, right? So by 30 days, 45, 90 days, they were out. And so I just kind of learned to let my actions speak for myself versus being one of those guys that, is long on talk and short on action.
And I agree, but I also think, and I'm actually writing an article about EQ versus IQ tomorrow for LinkedIn, and it's a lot about the soft skills. And I think you can agree with this as a podcast host, that sometimes it's what you don't say that helps you get the sale than what you do say. Like for me, I think one of my greatest gifts is I'm able to hear people and listen to people and find out what their needs are instead of me trying to sell them what I think they need. So how important are the soft skills in selling?
Oh, critical. Absolutely mission critical. So I think active listening, which I think is what you're talking about right there, is a skill set that we just don't learn, right? So you almost have to kind of train yourself. And salespeople, for the most part, are horrible at it. What they're listening to react, right? They're listening to respond versus listening to what the client is saying. And if you do really good discovery, i.e. fact finding, whatever you call it in your business, of finding out why the person's on the phone with you or on the Zoom or allowed you into their house and talking to them face to face, what is going on in their lives. And I think that just happens to be critical, right? So listening. Most salespeople think that they have to steamroll people with their words and with their objection handling skills and with their jiu-jitsu and whatever else that their trainer du jour is teaching today. And it really isn't. It's what you just said. It's really having the high EQ, right? So having a really high emotional quotient or emotional intelligence and really understanding and listening. A great sales presentation, the salesperson should speak less than 40%, right? I'd even say 30%. Just asking really good questions and then listening and let that person speak. And then ask a little bit deeper, right? Just, tell me a little bit more about that. What's going on? And if you're selling something that is commodity, maybe sometimes you don't need to build that emotional connection, really. If it's, XYZ widget and they're going on to call 5 different distributors of that. So, that could be easy. But now I think that bonds with that person and bonding rapport, I think we learn that, but we don't really understand that as salespeople. And I think that's what you're mentioning with the high EQ. That's really what the rapport is and the bonding. We think it's, oh, I see you played football, right? Or I see you like Iowa or something of that nature. That's not bonding and rapport. That's just reciting things that we've seen from visual cues in social media or on somebody's backdrop, right? Rapport is really understanding that person and meeting them where they're at and allowing them to have a safe space that they can have a really good conversation with you, much like you do with your podcast guests.
And for me, and before we even got on the show, I followed you on all your social media. Not to get anything, but just to get to know who Nicholas is.
Yeah.
Because I believe that sales is relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a transactional guy. I rather build real relationships because me and you may not do business, but me and your cousin Earl might do business because I treated you good, and you're like, hey, I know a guy that knows a guy, and I believe that everything is relationships for me in my life. But I think a lot of people, especially on like places like LinkedIn, they're so transactional that they really don't give a time for a relationship to build and to generate sales down the road. Because it's okay for me to sell you one car if I'm a car salesman, but when you start sending me all your cousins and your sisters and your brothers because I treated you right, that's when you create real wealth, right?
I think, you're spot on, obviously, and it's really understanding the lifetime value and the referral value of everybody that you are selling, right? And even if you don't sell them, but you leave such a lasting impression with them, you say, listen, at the end of the day, Richard, I just don't think this is the right thing for you, right? And that's okay, right? We're okay. It may be later on down the line, but you may know somebody that this is the right thing for, right? And as you can see, I'm not a heathen, right? I treat people with respect and dignity. And you may know somebody that just allow me to have that initial conversation with, introduce myself to them and introduce what I do and make them make the choice, right? You can see we're not high pressure in what we do and how we interact with people. So do specifically, do you know anybody that is looking for XYZ, right? Sometimes when we ask for referrals or we kind of build that referral relationship, we don't help the person understand who is the right person for us to talk to. And I think I learned from a mentor, Dan Kennedy, right? The lifetime value of a customer
Yeah.
is the most
Yeah.
important thing. And most people don't realize that. And most people don't calculate that. And and you should go back, and if you're a media, right? If you're buying media, you look at the lifetime value of customers coming from that media. And so, sometimes Facebook is inexpensive, but it may not produce the best clients for you, where, LinkedIn may, or a field sales team may, right? So there's different media sources, but you have to look at that. And the lifetime value really is the magical thing, right? And you're talking about, and I think you're a big proponent of making those deposits, right?
Yeah.
Saying, hey, listen, I'm paying this forward. Eventually there will be business that comes.
Yeah.
There's a balance in that too, right? I want to talk to the yin and yang of it, and we wouldn't be straight shooters if we just said, if you just give, 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 give. I think sometimes you do have to there are certain classes of people that are just takers, right? And it's okay to give them a little bit, but then also cut them off, right? I find that with some folks that it's just like, we've had like 22 different conversations, right? I've given, and you're not taking any action on anything I'm giving you anyway. So it eventually, maybe when they pay attention. So maybe we should move into a different relationship, i.e., a transactional relationship. I'm still going to give it for you. I'm still going to support you. I'm still going to love you, but I just can't keep on doing this for free. Just like you can't run your business for free. So there is a balance. But I do think that there are media sources where you could do one to many giving, right? Like you do with your podcast, like you do with LinkedIn articles, like you do with your books and speeches, right? So now you're giving one to many, and realizing that there's people in the audience, people listening, people reading your LinkedIn articles that will eventually come to you, right? So making it as good as possible, making it, really, because I do agree social media is very transactional. A lot of stuff that is posted, I think, on LinkedIn is a horrible culprit of that. One is could be the wrong advice because there's no filter, if you will, but it's really just the same Me Too advice. Your stuff is deep, right? So that's the important thing. And I think you should think about it. I like the fact that you're like, okay, I'm producing an article and this is what the article is about. It's not, I had a thought today, and so let me just post it on LinkedIn, because I think kind of we just rush to that. And so we're diminishing the quality of the postings, right? If I think about LinkedIn 5 years ago, and I remember reading, following people and reading their posts, they were very thought provoking. Now I see stuff in my feed, and there was a woman, probably a wonderful person. She's probably a great salesperson, but she was unboxing a Chanel bag she bought. Well, that doesn't belong on, that doesn't belong on LinkedIn. That's a TikTok thing or an Instagram thing, right? So I think, we are diminishing media sources because it's so easy to put things on media sources.
Yeah, and I think that you need to know the room that you're in.
Yeah.
Like for me, LinkedIn is mostly business. Sometimes it's personal,
Yeah.
but it's not a place for political crap.
No.
It's people are there for business. It's not Facebook is there for family. TikTok is there it's entertainment. So I think you need to know the room that you're in, and I think that's especially is true for sales because there's certain times you want to make a pitch, but there's some times when you're just like, you know what, it's not the right time.
Yeah.
And I believe that because sometimes like you see a lot of people, they go to these networking meetings, all they're doing is handing out cards and they're on to the next person. I'm like, I'd rather go sit with Nicholas for a couple minutes, have a cup of coffee, have a gelato, shoot the shit for a little bit. You're going to remember that more than the 8 people that handed you cards and talked to you for a second and said, hey, I'm in the industrial toilet paper business. Nice to meet you. Have a nice day. And I see that all the time, especially on places like not only in person, but also on LinkedIn. Is people, they're not they're not building real relationships. They're just trying to sell you their widget.
There is that, right? And at networking events, I think going a mile deep with somebody is much more important than going a mile wide with the entire crowd. And I think that's what you're saying is I'd rather talk to 3 people and have really good conversations with those 3 people. The other thing too is I think we are transactional, and I don't know how we got to that place, right? If you think about it, I grew up in the time of the Kiwanis and the Rotary and all that, right? Where these were just civic-minded individuals. And if business came from us being together, then it came from us being together. But really it was, let's talk about doing some things. We're behind 1 or 2 fundraisers for certain communities. And I'm not saying that isn't happening anymore, but I do think when people go to these networking events, it is it's almost like they're getting paid by getting as many cards as they possibly can, right? Or as many contacts as they possibly can versus just really going deep in it. Some of that's the pressure of the marketplace, right? Some of that might be that they don't have a prospecting engine other than this, right? Some of it could be oversaturation of certain industries, right? If you think about, real estate probably has an oversaturation of people in the marketplace because there's no barrier to entry, right? I read something like the average transaction of a real estate agent is 1 or 2 now, right? So I mean that's a lot of pressure, right? Unless you're selling a couple $1 million homes, then then the commission's going to be there. So I think it's a lot of things, but also we probably haven't taught people how to have real conversations, or it's just not something we do, right? So you look at it like your podcast, it's about going deep, it's about going, it's not fluff, right? I don't want to hear flippant answers or just talking points. I really want to go deep on some things, and I think that makes us vulnerable, but I think that's where the real magic happens.
And I love that. And like, we're not the average podcast here, we're in the top 0.5% for a reason. Is we don't do a lot of fluff. We're here to help people. We're here to make sure people get answers, the answers that they need. But also, there's a reason why we're have over 30,000 connections on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
because we're all about building. I believe that I can never have enough friends, and if Nicholas needs a roof, I know a roofer. I'm going to put you guys together, and I come out the hero because you had a need, he had a way to fix that need. I put you guys together, and I think if we start thinking of it like, because I'm a knight with the Knights of Columbus, And I
Okay.
believe that the more value I bring to this world, the more value I get in return. The world actually gives you what you put into it. And so I think even in sales, the more honest you are and the more integrity you have, the more successful you're going to be in sales for the long term. Correct?
I think wholeheartedly, right? And trust, right? Trust, and you do what you say you're going to do, both to yourself and to the marketplace. And I think that's where it's at. And I think sometimes that people are we're quick to give answers, and we're probably not going to fulfill them, right? We're even to ourselves, right? We're quick to say XYZ, right? And I think a lot of it could be, well, you think about your background, right? Coming from the army. Well, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. There was dire consequences for that. And so to me, that's innate in you, right? You also kind of grew up in the fitness world, right? So you had to have that intestinal fortitude and the modus operandi to really fight through and do what you say you're going to do and show up for your clients, and help them through, because it's easy to say, yeah, I'm going to work out, but are you really? Did you show up? Right. And then did you work out with intention? And so I think that's, really the important thing. And I think that one of the major things in sales is, maybe it goes back to what we were talking about before. People sometimes will say anything. I mean, it's like, and some of it could be the environment that they're in. Maybe it's a pressure cooker, or maybe it's just that they weren't trained, or maybe it's just that that's the modus operandi of the company that they're dealing with, right? So, really, do you deliver what you say you're going to deliver? Is what you say honest and ethical with people? And if you make a mistake, which happens, right? We're only humans. Do you own up to that mistake? And I don't see a lot of that sometimes.
And I agree 100% on what you're saying. But I also agree, like I said, I've been in sales my whole life. Um, I see people having problem asking for the credit card. I see it so many times, especially when I was selling timeshares on the table. They would go through a 3-hour presentation and then have problems asking for the credit card. And for me, I was like, hey, if I provided enough value, if I provided enough information, but not too much information, if I fixed your problem, you want Visa, Mastercard, or do you want
Yeah,
to pay cash?
yeah,
But I
yeah.
see so many people in the sales, they go through these presentations, but either they have they're afraid to pull the credit card, or they have problems with follow up. And I think follow up is one of the biggest thing in sales. What do you thought? What are your thoughts?
So I think you're talking about two lost arts. Okay. The first lost art is the art for asking for the conversion, asking for the money, asking for the sale, and then asking for the payment, because the sale doesn't happen unless the payment structure is taken, right? And also the realization that they don't get the benefit, and you just spent 3 hours, 3 minutes, 3:30, whatever it is, helping them figure out the benefits and how this, whatever it is, your product or service is going to help them get to where they at. So therefore, you just were a derelict of duty, because you didn't fulfill the transaction to help them get the benefit that you've talked to them about. And so you're nothing better than a flim-flam man that won't ask for the money. So I do think, though, it's a lack of training, and I do think it's the wrong personality types that are in sales, right? And they think that the sale is just in the front end, the bonding and the rapport, or just talking to people and asking questions. And that's not selling. The selling happens at the end of the transaction, of saying, listen, Nick, it seems like everything that you and I talked about today, Richard, could get you X, could get you Y, could get you Z in the time frame that we talked about, at the investment level that we talked about. So for me, the next step is, just let's consummate this conversation. Do you want to get miles, or you want to get points, right? How are you looking to kind of fulfill this? And that's my job, and that's your job as the salespeople. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. We listen to calls all day long, for salespeople, and they get them to the finish line and they just pull up, right? And I just think that that's horrible. It'd be like a football team stopping in the red zone. every time and just saying, okay, well, your turn now. And so that's our job as salespeople. But I do think that that's because we're putting people into sales that have a high need to be liked. And therefore, that need to be liked will not allow an uncomfortable conversation if it is uncomfortable, right? And sometimes it is. Asking for the money is uncomfortable. Maybe they have stuff going on in their head. Maybe they have a little bit of head trash going on. Maybe this $10,000 investment to them would put them into the danger zone, but it's the right investment for the person. So whatever it is. So I do see that. Some of it is because there's some industries out there where they're just, if you could fog a mirror, they're going to put you on the street as a salesperson, right? And they haven't trained you, but really haven't gone through the EQ that we talked about, the emotional intelligence or the emotional hardwiring that you have to go through to be able to be comfortable with that. So I think that is very mission critical, very mission critical. This third thing or the second thing that you spoke about, I think, is a lost art form also, and that's the art of follow-up, right? And I do think it's that I don't know why, right? I don't know why. I had one mentor that told me, it's like, listen, sometimes I'm really bad at opening, but I'm a son of a bitch on follow-up, right? And I think if you've done the right thing, you've earned that position to follow up with them, and it's their decision to say yes or no, right? Or it's their decision to say yes, I'll give your company try versus XYZ company, or it's their decision to say yes, it's now time to do that. And I think sometimes you have to look at your data, right? And yeah, we're all humans and we want the easy sale, but the easy sale is only a small percentage of what we get, right? The real sales come in, the real continuity money comes in building that relationship with somebody and asking for that order. And it may be 10 times, 14 times, 15 times, right? I heard a story, and he's very popular, and I think he's really good at what he does. I think Ryan Serhant, right? He was on $1 Million Listing. He was a real estate guy. Somebody that worked for him said that he emailed one person consistently listings for like 5.5 years and finally got a sale, right? Now, it's an easy follow-up, right? It's an email. Boom, here's some listings. The person responds with, hey, sorry, I haven't got back to you. I've been very busy. Let's go look at XYZ or 1, 2, 3. And I think if you go back and look at your book of business, when I had my marketing firm, we were tenacious on follow-up. And I never had somebody call and say, stop following up. I always had people say, thank you very much for the follow-up, right? Because they were busy and their business was taking their time and their energy. My job was to be in front of them. And once they said, yes, I want to do this, it's now my job to follow up, right? And so that's, I think, our roles and responsibilities as salespeople.
And I agree 1,000%. And like my friend Steve D. Sims talks about in his book Blue Fishing, that sometimes when everybody's going left, sometimes you got to go right. Like I know when we hang up with this phone call, when our interview's over, I'm going to be sending you out a handwritten thank you card.
Yeah.
And nobody gets handwritten thank you cards anymore.
Yeah.
And a lot of people I've written cards out to say, I just hung it on my refrigerator. Now when people come to my house, they're like, who sent you a handwritten thank you card, or what holiday was it? But I think that's the magic of follow-up, where once we hang up, eventually I'm going to be seeing your post and I'm going to be like, Nicholas, that's a great post.
Yeah.
Love what you talked about. Or Nicholas, I see it's your birthday. Happy birthday, my friend. That, for me, that's the follow-up that keeps you on top of people's minds, is when you do the things that other people aren't willing to do, right?
I agree. I think you hit some very key points. And I don't know if it's lack of training. It's that we came up in a different time, right? Every sales call I went on, if it was a first call, second call, third call, we were trained to write a follow-up thank you card, right, to people. Thank you for your time today. It was great to connect. Here's my card. Here's a couple different ones in case you run across people that could do what that need what I talked about. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times it's just it's just executing the basics, right? That's just common courtesy, what you talked about. I love Sims, right? Of thinking, one is a bombastic personality. So I like anybody that's like that, but thinking differently, right? And if the whole world is doing X, your differentiation is that personal touch. And I wrote myself a note because we could do better at that. I could do, whenever I'm pointing a finger, I got four going back at me, right? I could do better at that too. And it's really just taking the time to understand people and then taking the time to show that you care. And nowadays we're typing so much. I hate to see what my handwriting looks like, right? So it'll force you to become a better handwriter too, by writing that handwritten personal note. But it's just really treating people as humans, right? That lost art. If I remember, I mean, if you look at my mother's generation and my grandmother's generation, they were phenomenal at getting thank you cards out. Thank you very much. They were just, it was an art form and it was innate. It was class, right? And now, maybe a text if you get lucky or an email if you get lucky, but you really should really double down and do the interpersonal things. And I think his book Bluefish is really about doing things differently in the marketplace, and I think that will be a different way to show up, a different way to approach the marketplace, and really break through.
And well, like we were talking about earlier, we're both excited about AI.
Yeah,
And I think if you take AI and if you take old school and you take new school and you put them together, you can't help but win. Because even with AI, you're going to see a lot of fake stuff. But then all of a sudden, you go out to your mailbox and you see a package or you see a handwritten thank you note. It's going to mean a lot more because all you've been seeing lately is all AI generated stuff in your social media. So, what do you think about new school versus old school together?
I think it's the winning combination, and I think if you're not thinking about it and implementing that in your business, your competition is, and you're going to be you won't have a business if you're not doing it. And I don't mean to be that bombastic of an answer, but I think as a business owner, that's your responsibility. And I think you have to be merging the two. We were talking about a little bit, right, of kind of just the little things like building your list. AI is so much better at that than when we were coming up, right? We were buying lists or creating lists or buying, directories. I think just helping you craft your message. Now, I still think you need to tweak it as a human of crafting your marketing message, but I think it helps you get to at least somebody's doing the heavy lifting of the thinking of what's going on in the marketplace in the mind of your consumer, right? If it's a B2B or B2C, it doesn't matter. It's still a human. So what's going on in their mind, just like we learned from Robert Collier, enter the conversation going on in their mind. And I think it allows you to really understand your ICP and things of that nature. I think there are things you could do for the busy work, right? I do agree with you, Richard, and I do worry on the AI voice, right? And the AI video and what negative repercussions that will have, especially for the elderly, right? I think about my parents, if they get a AI voice call from one of my children and it sounds real, they're going to think that it's real, right? So there's the negative, right? And the negative, hopefully the positive outshines the negative and we just have to stay in front of it, but that's always been around since the dawn of time. So I think as a business owner, if you're not marrying old school and new school, i.e. using the tools that we talked about and the traits of yesteryear of handwritten personal notes, of gifting, of really meeting people where they're at, of having a firm understanding of what's going on with people, of doing things differently than your conversation, of living up to your word, right? And then combine that with AI for certain tasks, you're golden, right? You're going to the bank, you're cashing checks.
Yeah, and a lot of people, a lot of people ask me, well, why do you have AI? Why do you use AI? And I'm a big Chat GPT guy. I love Chat GPT 4.0.
Yep.
But a lot of people ask me, well, why do you use it? And I'm like, I don't know. How come when I go to my lawyer, I got to talk to his assistant first. Why, when I go to my doctor, do I got to talk to the physician's assistant? I hired ChatGPT as my assistant, not as a crutch, but to help me do the heavy lifting, the monotonous stuff.
100%. I mean, we talked about in the pregame of, we're doing more and more recruiting for sales and customer support. And AI is phenomenal. There's some tools out there that, help us find people faster than a human can. So I agree with you I think it's going to take the lower level employee out, right? And not need that, because AI could do it for you as the business owner, and it will help you up level your staff, right? I'm not saying that you don't hire people. I'm just saying you hire people for more diligent thinking work, right? More high level execution work, and you have the AI do the lower level. So to me, it's not a game changer, because that's trite, because I think it's beyond that. And I also think it's not if you do it as a business owner, it's you have to be doing it as a business owner.
All right. So I have somebody just texted me a question.
Okay.
They didn't want to show up on screen, so I understand.
No problem. Yeah.
And Craig wanted to know, I'm about to get out of the military in 6 months.
Okay.
What is your top 3 pieces of advice if I wanted to start my own business in 2025?
Well, I think we gave some of it here. So study a market that you have an affinity for, or that you want to serve, or study a market that you think is completely underserved, and think about how you could do things different, right? Much like we talked about Bill Sims. If they're going left in the marketplace, how do you go right? Right. So how do you differentiate yourself in the marketplace? What's unique about you, your USP, your unique selling proposition, your unique positioning, if you will, in the marketplace, and how are you going to serve people differently? Right. And it's doing the basics really, really well, which is, handwritten notes, right? Really being there for your customers, listening to people. That's the first thing. Second thing I would do is learn right now. You've got some runway. Learn and read and devour everything you can about sales and marketing and closing, right? Because we talked about the fact that a lot of people don't close, don't ask for that money. So become very, very comfortable with those 3 skill sets, because you're really not in the XYZ business. You're in the marketing and the selling of XYZ business. So become extremely good at that. That's the second thing. The third thing that I would do is really start figuring out how to deploy various AI, right? So if you're not a good copywriter, you're not a good writer, then get really good at Claude, right? Or ChatGPT 4.0. If you're not good at posting content, right? And I think you need to be doing that, then use ChatGPT and other vehicles to post that content, right? I had somebody build a bot for me where I just do a voice message into Slack. That voice message gets completely created one way for a posting on Instagram, one way for a posting on Facebook, and one way for a posting on LinkedIn, right? So I'm just doing one thing in 30 seconds, and now I got 4 posts. So that's the third thing I would do. The fourth thing, which is a bonus, because I know he asked for 3, so we're going to give him 4, is I would start really realizing that my connections is my biggest asset that I could create, right? In business, we say the list is the biggest asset. You don't have a business yet. So now just really go out and really connect with super high level connections and build up your network and realize where am I going to use it, right? So you and I, Richard, we talked a little bit about this. We use LinkedIn, right? You've done phenomenal, 30,000 connections. I mean, I get inspired to that. I think I'm at 12 or 13,000, and that's a yeoman's work, right? But great job on that. So emulate that to our listener. Second thing is maybe you're going to be on Facebook. So really start building up right audience people and connections or people that can help serve you, and Instagram, right? And think about TikTok, right? So media is inexpensive nowadays. And so the key is build up as much as you possibly can and realize their connections, right, really is the best asset that you have. And then as you're building your business, your list, your email list, your people that you could communicate with. Now you're not adherent to one person's media, but your own media, i.e. an email list. That's now becoming one of your best assets. So those are three really, really good things that I would do. I'd start with the grant. You start get Zig for sales, study it. I mean, people think it's trite because he's kind of it's old and he's folksy, but study it because it's gold. I'd get Dan Kennedy, right? Everything he read, I'd get that and I'd study it. Start with the direct response and understand that. I read Ogilvy, right, for advertising. I think Ogilvy is great on the word or the written word. And I would also look at Robert Collier. We talked about those books, right? So now just be a sponge, and you got audiobooks and you got library books and you've got Amazon. And I would just start studying and just, go a mile wide and an inch deep on these books, right? So read them 4 times, right? And you start getting new things every time you go through them.
Yep, and I agree. And that was the first name I wrote down was Zig Ziglar.
Yeah.
I love Zig. I think I've met his family. I wish I got a chance to meet him. I never did. I love Dan Kennedy. I think I have every book of his on Audible. I think also for the newer generations, if you want to pick up some books by Gary Vaynerchuk,
sure,
Alex Hormozy, and definitely the Secret series by Russell Brunson. If you're looking to get into doing, anything digital, definitely pick up books. But the best thing you can do is invest in yourself before you invest in a thing.
Yeah,
you know what I
mean. But I also think you're 100% obviously, but also there's a lot of noise in the marketplace. So the people that we gave you to your listener, these are proven folks, right? And you have to kind of separate the signal from the noise, if you will, because there's a lot of people out there that look good on camera. There's a lot of bros out there. There's a lot of people that rented a Ferrari for the hour to take their pictures, right? And there's a lot of people that, I never see people flying in private jets. I only see them walking up the stairs or standing in front of the jet. I never, so they've never flown on one. They've just they found one and they took a picture of it. So just be careful out there. And the folks that we gave you are tried and true and tested, right? And have kind of expanded the thought of time. And if you look at the followers that Zig has, well, every great salesperson can attribute their success back to that book or that audio tape. I'm old enough to know an audio tape and cassette, right? So you could go on audio now, right? And Dan, right? If you talk to anybody that's worth their salt and is a marketer, they, and once they found him, it was like magic. Certainly Gary Vee, right, has done a phenomenal job. I think one of his first books, which is Crush It, is an untold gem. I mean, I think the story that he told about just, the wine store is wonderful. And Alex Hormozy, I think he's take a little bit of with a grain of salt on him. He's done a great job. He's a great front man, but I think sometimes they expound upon how great they are or what they're doing now, and I think the math doesn't work out for me on some of the things. But I think $100,000 offers and $100,000 leads is a great place to start. But but it's really all copywriting, right? So you're going to learn that from Dan. You're going to learn that from David Ogilvy. You're going to learn that from crafting offers, right? So how to craft unique offers is you can never know that well enough. So I think we gave your listener a lot to do, and I think the best thing that Richard said is invest in yourself before you invest in the business.
Yep, and also honorable mention to Jay Abraham. You guys don't know if you guys don't know Jay Abraham. You need to get to know Jay Abraham.
Yeah, the Parthenon, right? I think is phenomenal. His book or audio tape on referrals. I think 93 Ways to Get Referrals is phenomenal. He is, he's a great mind. Great mind. If you want to get more into marketing too, I think Trout and Rice, right? Differentiation, the 22 amiable malls of advertising, I think are great. For people. So it's blocking and tackling. It is going to the basics and executing those basics really well. And I think it's kind of the circle of what we talked about. It's having enough to know the basics of just common decency of writing somebody a thank you note, right? Or just recognizing them on their birthday or whatever it is, right? Or just give, it's all of that.
So now, what is going on in the world of Nicholas? What do you got coming up? How could we get involved? How could we get into your ecosystem?
Well, hey, if you want to learn more about us, you could get into our ecosystem, get on our email list. We try to do a lot of giveaways, right? So we give a lot of content. Go to SalesPack, SALES, PACK, PACK, .salesperformanceteam.com. You could hit our email, Nick at Sales Performance Team or info at Sales Performance Team, and we'll make sure we get you all that stuff. We've got some workshops coming up that we're really excited about. That we're going to do, right? So kind of how to be a better sales manager workshop, how to be a better salesperson. And then we're doing one on video, right? So video killed the radio star, right? And using video in your sales process and your sales team. Those are some of them. I don't know if they're going to be virtual. They're going to be Chicago based for sure. And so we're doing those workshops in the summer and the fall. So right now we're gearing up the marketing to that.
I just seen that on LinkedIn today, matter of fact.
Did you? Yeah.
I follow you, brother. If I say that I follow you, I mean that I follow you.
Yeah, we're all for it. We have some mastermind groups, right? So for people that are sales leaders, I think it's one of the loneliest jobs in corporate America or in business. And so we've created a peer group, much like how, Richard, you've been involved in masterminds and you have resilient masterminds, and that we've created one just for sales leaders. And it's a non-competitive, right? So you're not going to be talking to somebody that's in the same space as you're in. And it's at different levels, right? So somebody that's company's doing 5 million is going to be at a different cohort than somebody that's company's doing 100 million, because their issues are different, right? So that's the thing that I'm excited about. And that's one of, these are all ways that we'd like to give back to people.
And you are an author also, aren't you?
I have a couple books, right? I'm not, they're business books and they're quick books, if you will, right? Because I think a lot of times if you read business books, there's a lot of fluff in them, right? Because they want to get to 200 pages or 185 pages. So they tell a lot of stories, which stories are great, but sometimes in the business book, it doesn't stand the test of time, right? So we've written 2 to 3 books. We've got a new one that I'm working on that I need to get kind of finished. Maybe I got a long flight coming up, so maybe I could there and back. I get it finished, and it's about hiring salespeople, right? The process and thought process that we have. So we have how to manage your sales team, moving the sales needle and this one will be the no BS approach to hiring salespeople.
And where do we find those books?
Amazon. Amazon is the best place. Or send me a note if you, like your friend that's starting in business, if he wants an e-copy, we'll send him an e-copy, or we'll send him a physical copy. If somebody sends us their email, their physical address, we'll put a copy in the mail to them.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love you and I appreciate you. I'm so grateful that we got to spend this quality time today, brother.
Oh, it's awesome, man. I love your approach, right? I love the talk about resilience, and I think nobody could speak to it better than somebody that, certainly has had your background, depth of background, and all the different things you did. And I don't think we talk about resilience enough. And I think it's, if you talk about stoicism, right? Resilience is one of the core things that push us forward. And I don't know if we're creating resilience in young people or even in middle-aged and older people, right? I think, maybe we've gotten a little bit too soft. So how do we create that resilience to get us through? Because it's the things that knock us down that we get up from that make us stronger. And if you're in business, you're going to get knocked down. I mean, you and I both know we're going to get knocked down 3 times today, right? I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen as soon as you and I hang up. But there'll be times that I just got to bounce back from stuff, and it's easy to shut down. And I've done that, right? It's I've had points where I just shut down and did the wrong things to cope, right? Whether it was eating Oreos, or McDonald's, or that, but. You got to be resilient. So I love the podcast and I love the message of resiliency. And I don't think we could talk about it enough.
And I'm so grateful and humbled. And guys, like Rocky said, you get knocked down 7, you get back up 8. And that's what it's all about. But guys, the way I end the show every week is, I'm a big Joel Osteen guy. And something that I love, he said, is every morning we wake up, we have a choice. We can either be a victim or we can be a victor. And if you guys listen to this show, you're no longer victims of your past, but you're victors of your present and future. So thank you guys for always showing up, and thank you guys for what you do. Nicholas, my brother, it's truly been my honor to have you on the show today.
Richard, you're a class act. And your message needs to be heard. So anything I could do, we're going to promote the heck out of your show always. But anything I could do to carry your message forward, please let me know.
I love you. Have an amazing day. And guys, remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. I love you guys. Have an amazing week. Take care of yourself and take care of others.